By the time I hit my 50s, I'd learned a few things, like how family is precious. Work can always wait. And 99% of people over 50 already have the virus that causes shingles. Not everyone at risk will develop it, but I did. The painful, blistering rash disrupted my life for weeks. Don't learn about your shingles risk the hard way. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, a show where I discuss crimes committed by military members and veterans, all with one goal in mind, to remind you to remain vigilant always. Hi, everyone. Happy spring break, or soon-to-be spring break for all of you out there. I'm currently on my military tour this year, so I'm going to try to get the next few episodes up on time. But it all just depends. So honestly, be sure to follow the show so that you know when I put out a new episode. This week, I will be releasing my new bonus episode on Patreon and Apple Premium, and it's a case that was supposed to be a headlines episode, but it ended up being its very own standalone case, and it's the pharmacy fraud case out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, and it is absolutely insane. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you join Patreon or Apple Premium as soon as I drop that later this week. And well, listen, today's headlines episode is just a little bit crazy. I actually had a full entire episode ready to go, but then something happened that made me pivot to a headlines episode. And the reason I pivoted was because of the Old Dominion school shooting that claimed the life of an ROTC instructor. Y'all, when I say that I really choked up, I just was in complete shock. As an ROTC grad myself, I had flashbacks to sitting in military science classes and my instructors standing in the front in uniform, teaching us whatever they were teaching us that day. And that case just really shook me. And of course, it is going to be the first case I cover. And like I said, I am still shook by the facts of that case. And let me tell you, there are so many times when I'm doing research for Headlines episode where I could easily cover all of these cases, but a lot of them I find extremely difficult to discuss. And this week, I came across a few cases involving children particularly that fully enraged my soul. That being said, let's get into it. And the one that really enraged my soul more than the one I'm already going to cover, I'm not actually covering because it was just too much to even, I couldn't cover it. So with that, just as a reminder, with all my headlines episode, all suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Many of these cases are simply allegations, so let's keep that in mind as we go into every single headlines episode. I have several lined up for you today, so let's dig in.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
With that frightening campus assault at Old Dominion University in Virginia. A gunman with known ties to ISIS entering a classroom and opening fire.
All new this noon, a retired U.S. Army colonel will spend 2 years in federal prison for sharing classified information. Prosecutors say he texted a photo of a classified email.
A Hillsborough County judge has sentenced U.S. Army veteran Tyrone Covington to 30 years in prison for the fatal beating of an 8-year-old Brandon boy. He received
Last week, on March 12, 2026, which should have been an ordinary Army ROTC class at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, turned into a deadly act of violence. At about 10:49 a.m., a gunman entered a classroom in Constant Hall, reportedly asked whether it was, like an ROTC class or whatever, and then he opened fire. Lieutenant Colonel Brandon A. Shah, the school's professor of military science and department chair, was killed in that incident. 2 ROTC students were also wounded in the attack. Now, authorities are reporting that the ROTC students, then subdued the gunman who died at the scene. The FBI is investigating the shooting as an act of terrorism. The alleged attacker was identified as Mohammed Baylor Jallo, a former Virginia Army National Guards member who had previously been convicted in federal court for attempting to support ISIS. Reports say that he served time in prison and was released in December of 2024. Witness accounts and reporting indicates that the man shouted Allah Akbar before opening fire in the classroom. And the investigators, as I said, are treating this not only as an act of terrorism, but as a targeted act on the ROTC group in that classroom. So I want to talk about the victim. Lieutenant Colonel Shah was an Army officer, an aviator, an alumnus, and teacher who had come back to his alma mater to mentor the next generation of military officers. Before it was taken down, Old Dominion's Army ROTC page identified Lieutenant Colonel Shah as a Virginia native, an ODU graduate and commissionee, and the current professor of military science for the university's Army ROTC program. He first enlisted in the Army in 2003 as an aviation operations specialist. He rose to the rank of sergeant and then earned his commission after graduating from ODU in 2007 with a degree in sociology and a minor in military science. From there, Shah built a substantial Army career. According to his faculty biography, he deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Atlantic Resolve. He earned his Army Aviation Senior Aviator wings, flew more than 1,200 hours across 3 different aircraft, and logged more than 600 combat flight hours. Friends and colleagues described him as deeply devoted to the Army and to teaching cadets. And that part matters because Shah wasn't killed in combat overseas. He was killed inside of a classroom on a college campus while doing the work of developing future Army leaders. That is part of what really makes this case hit so hard. Reporting so far suggests that the gunman specifically targeted this ROTC class. CCTV and witness accounts indicate that the man, the perpetrator, parked on campus before the attack and entered the building shortly before the shooting. Police arrived within minutes of receiving the calls, but by then, ROTC students in the class had already acted, which is so amazing. According to reporting, after the perpetrator opened fire, ROTC cadets didn't cower in the corner. They confronted the gunman, and during the struggle, one of the cadets fatally stabbed the perpetrator. Stopping what officials suggest could have easily been a large massacre. 2 ROTC members were injured in the process. One report said that one remained in critical condition, while the other was treated and released. And the broader background on the shooter is deeply disturbing. Jallo served in the Guard until 2015, and he received an honorable discharge on his way out. But then Jallo pled guilty in 2016 after an investigation revealed that he was attempting to provide material support to ISIS. That history has fueled public outrage and immediate scrutiny over how this guy was able to return to civilian life and then allegedly carry out an attack targeting military personnel on a U.S. campus. The full motive is still under investigation, but listen, authorities have made it clear that terrorism is a central focus. As it turns out, during the 2016 case, this guy had told others that he wanted to commit what he called a Nadal Hassan. Basically, he was referring to the 2009 Fort Hood massacre that resulted in the deaths of 13 military members. As the university community reeled over this incident, officials canceled classes and suspended operations while tributes to Shah began pouring in. Reports described him as a husband, a father, a veteran, and a mentor who had been preparing for retirement to spend more time with his family. I mean, he had already served 23 years. That detail is especially heartbreaking because after years of service, after years of combat deployments, after surviving war zones, this man was killed at home while serving in an educational role. This next story is an update to a Headlines episode that I covered way back in August of 2025. You might remember that back then I covered a Corpus Christi-based naval aviator who was accused in a civil suit of secretly spiking a woman's hot cocoa with abortion medication, causing the loss of her pregnancy. Well, I completely missed it, but back in October of 2025, Christopher Cooprider, the aviator, not only denied the allegation during a press conference, but he filed a countersuit. According to reporting and docket records, Cooprider has filed a countersuit seeking roughly $1.1 billion in damages. That's billion with a B. And he's doing so with a new high-profile legal team that is working pro bono. Why pro bono, you might ask? Well, because this is a politically charged case involving abortion law, alleged reproductive coercion, wrongful death claims, And now there's an explosive countersuit accusing the original plaintiff of fabricating the entire lie. Yup, they're saying that it never happened. She's a liar, liar, pants on fire. Now, a quick recap from what happened and when I talked about this case in August. This woman named Leanna Davis sued Coopwriter in federal court in August of 2005, basically alleging that after she became pregnant with his baby, Coopwriter repeatedly pressured her to get rid of it. He then obtained abortion pills through the mail and then on April 5th, 2025, secretly dissolved the medication into a cup of hot cocoa that he prepared for her at her home in Corpus Christi. Davis alleges that within about 30 minutes or so, she began bleeding and cramping. She went to the hospital and there she learned that she lost the pregnancy at around 8 weeks. Her suit also named Aid Access and Dr. Rebecca Gompertz, alleging that the abortion medication was supplied through their system. But now, Coopwriter's response is sweeping. According to reporting on the countersuit, Coopwriter says the story is false, and he accuses Davis of intentionally inventing the hot cocoa poisoning narrative for a couple of reasons, right? Financial, political, and personal reasons. The countersuit reportedly frames Davis's original suit as defamatory and malicious, and it is seeking a whopping $1.1 billion in damages. It also reportedly argues that the allegations were used to influence public debate and legal efforts surrounding the abortion pill litigation in Texas. And this is where the case gets especially messy. Coopwriter's countersuit is alleging that Davis has a pattern of instability and dishonesty, and that the facts do not support the claim that he secretly drugged her. Additionally, as reported by Clara Benitez Cortez from Chris 6 News, the Corpus Christi PD stated that after careful review of the case, together with the DA's office, they decided to not move forward with any criminal charges because no elements of a crime could be established. One detective in the case noted that after speaking to Davis's OBGYN, they learned that Davis had a high-risk pregnancy to begin with, and the investigators determined she likely had a natural miscarriage. Well, for the criminal matter, Davis knew Coopwriter would not face murder charges as early as May 2025, after allegedly receiving an email from the detective, but she still went ahead and filed her civil suit in August, which, listen, you can still file a civil suit even after a full acquittal of a criminal case. So there is that. At this point, this is where we are. This is still a civil case, not a criminal prosecution. Public reporting I found says there was no active criminal investigation at the time the original civil suit was reported, even though Davis did say that she turned over alleged pill packaging to police. So right now, this legal fight appears to be playing out primarily in federal court through wrongful death claims, abortion-related statutory claims, and now defamation-style counterclaims. The other important piece here is the legal and political background. The original suit landed in Texas at a time when abortion pill litigation and enforcement were already major flashpoints. And reporting indicates the case drew attention in part because Davis was represented by Jonathan Mitchell, the lawyer known for helping craft Texas Senate Bill 8. Then, Coopwriter's countersuit came in with its own aggressive framing, especially arguing that he was being turned into a political symbol through false allegations. So this case is not just emotionally charged, it is happening inside a much larger ideological war over abortion law, private enforcement, and reproductive misconduct. As for the pro bono part, public reporting says Coopwriter's side has emphasized that his attorneys, they're no kidding representing him without charging fees. And the attorneys further stated that if they win, their client intends to donate all the money to the Wounded Warrior Project. I want to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Quince. Lately, I've been in a full quality over quantity phase, especially when it comes to my wardrobe. If it's not versatile, well-made, and something that I can wear to school drop-off, I don't want it. And that is exactly why I keep reaching for Quince. Quince makes high-quality wardrobe staples using premium fabrics like 100% European linen, 100% silk, and organic cotton poplin. Their lightweight cotton cashmere sweaters are perfect for this in-between season. Because who knows what the weather's going to be like tomorrow, right? And I'm really loving not only the quality of the material, but also their spring colors and prints. These are versatile, well-made pieces that just make getting dressed simple. And let's talk about fabric for another second, right? Because you can feel the difference of Quince. Their cotton poplin is crisp and it holds its shape. The gauze is soft without being flimsy. And their 100% European linen, Well, let's just say it's elevated. Everything Quince makes is built to hold up season after season. The stitching, the fit, the fabrics, these are pieces that you'll reach for over and over. Now, one of my favorite pieces right now is their cotton cashmere sweater. It has become my go-to. It's light enough for layering, but still feels luxe. And it didn't cost me an arm and a leg. And that's the part that gets me. Quince works directly with safe, ethical factories, and it cuts out the middleman. So you're not paying for brand markups or fancy retail stores. You're just paying for quality clothing. And I'm clearly not the only one who loves them. Quince clothing is consistently rated 4.5 to 5 stars by thousands of customers. Real people like you and I wearing these pieces every day and actually loving them. So listen, stop waiting to build the wardrobe you actually want. You don't need a closet full of options. You need pieces that work. And right now, when you visit quince.com/militarymama, you get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's a full year to wear it and love it, and you will. Now available in Canada too. Don't go settle for clothes that don't last. Visit quince.com/militarymama. That's QUINCE.com/militarymama. When you visit quince.com/militarymama, you get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/militarymama. All right, now back to the show. I want to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Gusto. You guys know that I wear a lot of hats, right? I'm running Mama Margot Productions. I'm managing sponsors, handling contracts, tracking expenses, paying editors, researchers, and writers. And let me tell you, the admin side of running a business, it can eat your entire day if you let it. There have absolutely been moments when I'm staring at a tax form and I'm like, wait, there has got to be an easier way to do this. And that's where Gusto comes in. Gusto is an online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. It's all-in-one, remote-friendly, and incredibly easy to use so that you can pay, hire, onboard, and support your team from anywhere. If you're growing a business, Gusto handles automatic payroll tax filing, simple direct deposits, health benefits, workers' comp, and even 401k options. It basically gives you the infrastructure of a big business without the chaos. And if you've ever dealt with a complicated HR situation and thought, I'm way out of my league, well, Gusto takes the guesswork out. They give you direct access to a certified HR expert, and that's huge. So listen, if you're serious about building something sustainable, not just a side hustle, but a real business, having your payroll and HR dialed in is part of leveling up. And I've teamed up with Gusto to get you a great deal. You can try Gusto today at gusto.com/MMP, and there you can get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's 3 months of free payroll by visiting gusto.com/MMP, which is short for Mama Margot Productions. All right, one more time. Check out gusto.com/MMP for 3 months of free payroll. All right, guys, now let's get back to the show. This next case is out of Fort Hood, and it's one of those cases where we'll never know what really happened. On August 27, 2023, a routine morning at Fort Hood, Texas took a devastating turn when 30-year-old Sergeant Alfredo Martinez was found suffering from a gunshot wound in his on-post home where he had been drinking with 2 fellow soldiers. Martinez was transported to the Darnell Army Medical Center where he died later that morning. Authorities initially treated his death as a possible suicide because of the way that the initial story was told. But as investigators dug deeper, it became clear that the truth was far more complicated. And ultimately, the case would become one of the most unusual military murder cases in recent years. According to investigators and court filings, Martinez had spent the night drinking heavily with 2 soldiers from his unit, Specialist Nicholas Lowry and Specialist Renee Heber. At about 8 a.m., Heber called 911, telling the operator that Martinez had shot himself in the head. Martinez was still alive when emergency responders arrived, but he later died at the hospital. Lowry and Heber initially told Army CID the same story. Martinez had taken his own life. But in a later 11-hour CID interview, Lowry changed his account, telling agents under questioning that he himself had shot Martinez. Law enforcement then brought Heber in for further questioning. With those conflicting accounts and forensic evidence under review, Army prosecutors charged both men under the UCMJ. Lowry was indicted for unpremeditated murder and obstruction of justice, and Heber was charged with accessory to murder after the fact, accessory to manslaughter after the fact, and obstructing justice in connection with Martinez's death. In January of 2026, Lowry's case finally went to a military court-martial at Fort Hood. The prosecution painted a picture of what they described as a chaotic night involving alcohol, roughhousing, and mishandling of firearms, with Lowry's later confession central to their case. But the defense took a radically different approach. Lowry's attorneys argued that his confession to shooting Martinez was coerced, that CID interrogators misled him, asserting that they already had evidence, and that he was led to adopt a narrative that wasn't at all true. They also pointed out problems with how evidence was handled and how the initial story that Martinez shot himself had actually been accepted for a long time. After 8 days of testimony and roughly 4 hours of deliberations, a military jury acquitted Lowry of both unpremeditated murder and obstruction of justice, and that was on January 13, 2026. The verdict shocked the Martinez family and many observers, because they were really just relying on that confession. Now, the Fort Hood leadership issued a measured statement reiterating faith in the military justice system and respect for the jury's decision, even as emotional scenes unfolded in the courtroom, with family members, of course, of both Martinez and Lowry visibly affected by the outcome. So you're probably wondering, what happened to the other guy, Specialist Renee Heber? While Lowry was acquitted, the case did not immediately end there. Heber was still facing the lesser charges related to allegedly helping conceal the incident. But in January of 2026, shortly after Lowry's acquittal, Army prosecutors made a difficult decision. The charges against Heber were dropped, not because prosecutors believed he was innocent, but because with Lowry cleared of the shooting, the likelihood of obtaining a conviction for accessory and obstruction was judged too low given the current evidence and legal standards. As the Army's Office of Special Trial Counsel explained, they continually assess cases in light of new developments, and dropping the case was, in their judgment, the best path forward. The decision also followed an earlier withdrawal of charges against Heber in 2024, as the legal process became increasingly complex and moved through motions and appeals. Heber had also spent some time in pretrial confinement where he faced unrelated assault charges from a completely unrelated case in 2024. For the Army community at Fort Hood, Sergeant Alfredo Martinez's death remains a loss without a legal closure that many expected. For his family and friends, the grief continues amid unanswered questions about how and why he actually died. Our next case is out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, but it stemmed out of Tennessee. On Christmas Eve 2025, just before 10 p.m., authorities responded to reports of shots fired near a wooded area in Rockwood, Tennessee. When authorities responded, they found 48-year-old Tommy Cooper suffering from a gunshot wound. There was another victim who was injured, but those injuries were not life-threatening. Tommy, however, died from his injuries. No arrests were immediately made until February of 2025, when authorities arrested 24-year-old soldier Jacob Stinnett, stationed at Fort Bragg. Specialist Stinnett was extradited back to Tennessee, where he was charged with 1 count of second-degree murder. While a motive for the shooting has not been disclosed, reporting did note the suspect is the victim's nephew. However, this case is further interesting because the victim in this case, Tommy, had actually made headlines months before his death, when bounty hunters found a cache of explosives on Tommy's property. Tommy was later charged with 4 prohibited weapons counts, and at the time of his arrest, authorities found a military rocket launcher on Tommy's property. There is no mention of what came of those charges or why it took authorities 2 months to make an arrest in Tommy's murder. My next case has drawn widespread attention, not just because of the serious nature of the charges, which they are, but because of who the accused is. The accused is a former U.S. Marine Corps sergeant and social media influencer who is now facing multiple federal counts related to sexual abuse of a minor. The suspect, 27-year-old Tyler Valencia, built a large online brand after his time in uniform. He was posting fitness videos, live streams, and all those inspirational type content. And he had or amassed about 1.5 million followers. But in early 2026, Valencia was indicted on some serious charges involving a minor. According to a federal indictment filed February 10, 2026, in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia, Valencia is accused of a series of offenses involving a 14-year-old girl that allegedly took place over the course of about 10 months in 2025. The charges against him include sexual abuse of a minor, coercion and enticement of a minor to engage in illegal sexual activity, travel with intent to engage in illicit sexual conduct, and transportation of sexually explicit images of minors. Each of these federal crimes carries significant penalties if he's eventually convicted. So how does this entire case unfold? Here's the timeline. Investigators said that Valencia first made contact with this young girl through a private message on TikTok, and this was in early 2025. The girl, who reportedly identified herself as 14 and as a freshman in high school in those messages multiple times, received communication from Valencia that included inappropriate and sexually explicit content. Prosecutors allege that despite knowing her age, Valencia continued the correspondence. Over time, the communications escalated, and in April of 2025, Valencia traveled to Virginia to meet with the girl in person. There, authorities say they engaged in sexual activity. Prosecutors further allege that Valencia later traveled to Illinois 3 months after that first meeting to see the victim again. The investigation took a decisive turn when the girl's father discovered alarming messages including nude images on his daughter's phone and reported them to police. So, what happened next? Well, the FBI got involved and an FBI agent posed as a teenager and arranged the meeting with Valencia at a mall in Virginia, where he promptly showed up and was arrested on January 19, 2026. The formal complaint was filed in federal court on January 20th, 2026. Well, Valencia's online presence was a large part of why this case received national attention. He served in the Marine Corps from 2018 through 2023, and he was stationed in San Diego. After leaving the Marines, he stayed in the area to focus on his online brand, his fitness content, and live streaming, activities that actually helped him amass a significant social media following. But according to prosecutors, investigators reportedly found images and messages connected to Valencia's accounts, his social media accounts, and they repeatedly showed interaction with Valencia and the minor in question. But guess what? This was not the first kind of investigation into this guy. Court documents note that this was not the first time that he conducted or, that he was a part of conduct that drew scrutiny. According to the indictment, he solicited sexually explicit images of another minor in 2023, and he was actually still in the Marine Corps at the time. But because he was being discharged or he was kind of on his way out, that earlier matter was referred to local law enforcement and no charges were filed then. The 2026 indictment, however, brought those allegations into federal view alongside much more serious conduct extending into 2025. Valencia now faces a multi-count federal indictment that federal prosecutors have described as a priority given the nature of the allegations, his online influence, and the interstate elements of the case. Among the counts are sexual abuse of a minor, coercion and enticement of a minor to engage in illegal sexual activity, travel with intent to engage in illegal sexual conduct, transportation of sexually explicit images of minors. If convicted, each of these charges carries significant prison time and potential lifetime consequences, including mandatory registration as a sex offender and limits on future access to digital platforms or contact with minors.
An all-new season of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
Mom Talk has just been blowing up.
Whitney and Jen are on Dancing with the Stars.
Taylor is a bachelorette.
Saying that out loud is crazy. That is huge.
But all the cool opportunities could pull us apart.
It's causing issues in everyone's marriage.
My whole world is falling apart right now. It's chaos.
Watch the Hulu original series, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Cologuard. Do you know what's really scary? Not screening for colon cancer when you turn 45. The Cologuard test is non-invasive, requires no special prep or time off work, and ships right to your door. In just 3 simple steps, Cologuard takes the scare out of colon cancer screening. If you're 45 or older and at average risk, ask your healthcare provider about the Cologuard test. Cologuard is available by prescription only. Learn more or request a prescription today at Cologuard.com/screen.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Selling your car shouldn't feel like a second job. It should feel easy. With Carvana, it is. Just visit Carvana.com, enter your license plate or VIN, answer a few quick questions, and get an offer in minutes. Like what you see? We'll pick it up right from your door and hand you your check. No haggling, no hassle, no problem. Car selling made easy on
Carvana.
Carvana.
Pickup fees may apply.
My next case sounds nearly unbelievable, yet underscores how serious mishandling classified information can be. Because in this case, a long-serving U.S. Army retired officer ended up in federal prison, not for espionage or betrayal to a foreign power, but for simply trying to impress someone that he met online. That's right. 62-year-old Kevin Charles Luke retired from the U.S. Army in June of 2018 with the rank of colonel after nearly 4 decades of service, including both active duty and reserve time. After his retirement, he continued working with the DoD as a civilian employee and a contractor at U.S. Central Command headquarters in Tampa, Florida. That's where he maintained a top-secret, sensitive, compartmented information security clearance, the kind of clearance reserved for the most sensitive national defense information. I mean, it's safe to say that Kevin Luke was trustworthy until he wasn't. According to federal prosecutors, Luke began communicating with a woman he had met online. He was kind of like trying to woo her or whatever. So that was when, using his personal cell phone and computer, he would send her like random messages, right? In one text message, he sent her a picture that he took with his phone of a classified email that he had drafted on his government computer. Then, after he sent her that picture, he wrote, quote, "Sent to my boss earlier, gives you a peek at what I do for a living," end quote. And that email wasn't just some innocuous message. The photograph revealed details of a then future U.S. military operation, including the date the operation was planned, the number of intended targets, the means of executing the operation, and the purpose and objectives of the mission. All of this information was marked secret, FVEY, meaning it was not only secret within the United States government, but also meant only to be shared with the Five Eyes intelligence agencies. Yet Luke knowingly sent it from a personal cell phone to someone with no authorization to receive classified national defense information. Federal authorities noted that Luke had repeatedly acknowledged his obligation to protect classified information. You're constantly having to sign the NDA forms and the Form 312s and all of that. And he was well aware that his personal devices were not authorized to store or transmit anything related to national defense. Well, guess what happened? Shortly after that exchange in 2025, the online relationship ended. And it must have ended badly, right? Because the woman reported Luke to authorities, and that phone call to federal law enforcement set off a chain of reaction. OSI and the FBI had to open an investigation. Agents obtained a search warrant for Luke's home and his workplace, and they reportedly found additional classified documents that Luke was not cleared to keep on personal devices or at home, including emails and a secret notebook. Crucially, it should be noted, investigators never uncovered evidence that the woman had passed the information on to foreign actors. But that did not lessen the severity of the offense under U.S. law. Sharing classified military information outside of authorized military channels is a federal crime, regardless of where that information ends up. So, in October of 2025, Luke made a critical decision. He pled guilty to a single count of unauthorized communication of information relating to the national defense in the U.S. District Court of the Middle District of Florida. In his plea agreement, he admitted that he had abused a position of public trust and acknowledged responsibility for the breach. Then, in February of 2026, he received his sentence. A U.S. district judge sentenced Luke to 24 months in federal prison. The Department of Justice press release explained that the unauthorized disclosure of such information could be expected to cause serious damage to the national security of the United States. Depending on federal agencies and good behavior credits, that 2-year sentence could be reduced somewhat in practice, but it means Luke will spend real time behind bars, which is the dramatic fall from a long career in uniform and government service. Not gonna lie, guys, this next case is my last case, and when I read it, I completely lost it. I was reading the law and crime synopsis of the following case, and I just got so sad. I'm going to just share briefly what happened because it's just really sad. Back in October of 2020, there was an Army veteran by the name of Tyrone Covington. He and his girlfriend and her children were relocating to a new place, and they spent that day moving their things in their vehicle back and forth. They would go back to the new house, they would come back to the old house, and they did that back and forth, right? Well, at the end of the day, it was discovered that one of the girlfriend's kids, specifically her 8-year-old son, had accidentally locked the keys inside of the vehicle. The girlfriend told Tyrone to deal with it regarding the discipline aspect of it, right? And in the meantime, they got the key situation figured out by calling a locksmith. After the car had already been unlocked and everything had been taken care of, 45-year-old Covington, the veteran, he then went into a complete lashing. He beat the 8-year-old boy with a belt, hitting him more than 100 times. Now, in between the 100 lashings, he forced the little boy to do military drills, things like push-ups, sit-ups, jumping jacks, all while lashing him with a belt. After the beating was over, the little boy was struggling to breathe and eventually fell unconscious. The mother then called 911. I mean, where the hell was this mother when this little boy was getting beaten and she was just watching or in another room or unpacking? I have no idea. But sadly, that little boy died. Covington was then charged with first-degree murder. But for whatever reason, he argued that it wasn't him who beat the little boy. It was the older brother because the kids were always fighting and it was probably him. But the jury didn't buy the story because at his 2026 trial, the jury did convict him, but they convicted him of the lesser crime, which was manslaughter. At sentencing, the judge was rightfully pissed and he sentenced Covington to a whopping 30 years in prison. Sadly, at the trial, the older brother, who was 14 years old at the time but was 19 at the time of the trial, he talked about his little brother and he was there when his little brother was beat. He spoke out in court wondering if only he had stepped in instead of watching from the corner in terror. If maybe he would have stepped in, he thought maybe his brother would still be here today. True Crime Army, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Be sure to tune in next week where I will bring you a brand new case. And if you're interested in listening to all of my full-length bonus episodes, be sure to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/militarymurder. Or if you listen to me on Apple, you can join my Apple Premium subscription channel. All right, my sources for this episode include various federal court indictments and complaints, Department of Justice press releases, as well as reporting on osi.af.mil, Houston Chronicle, Dallas Morning News, The Independent, The Washington Post, The Fayetteville Observer, WVLT, 3B Media News, People Magazine, The Guardian, ODU.edu, Military.com, and Stars and Stripes. Military Murder is a Mama Margot production. The music was created by Ty-Ops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next time.
Mama's working on her podcast. I don't want to.